A massive revolt is sweeping Hungary. Thousands of truckers have paralyzed the capital, sparking a crisis that threatens to topple Viktor Orban and shatter Putin's last fortress in Europe.
Hajrá! Nagyon sokan
A huge wave of protests is rising in Hungary. Thousands of trucks, thousands of farmers, hundreds of thousands of people are pouring into the streets. They all share one common problem: Orban, Putin, and the corrupt oligarchic regime. On December 22nd and 23rd, thousands of angry truck drivers protesting against Viktor Orban's regime turned the most critical logistics route into a pile of metal. This convoy, stretching for miles on the M3 motorway, is not just a simple strike. It is an organized logistics revolt that has opened a gaping hole in Europe's supply chain. The government's devastating toll hikes, disguised as infrastructure fees, were the last straw for Hungarian hauliers. Thousands of people behind the wheel effectively paralyzed the capital by turning off their engines. The sound of horns echoing through the streets of Budapest is the most concrete proof that Orban's promise of stability has been crushed by his own workers. The epicenter of the incident is the M3 highway, which runs from northeastern Hungary to the capital and is the backbone of European transit traffic. The point where the protest began is not just a road, but also a strategic corridor that allows goods from Ukraine, Romania, and Slovakia to flow to Western Europe. On the morning of December 22nd, drivers organized under the Több mint kamionos, more than truckers, movement blocked this strategic route with their massive vehicles, effectively shutting down Budapest's northern entrance. According to Utinform data, this congestion not only affected the M3, but also paralyzed the M0 ring road, the main distribution network around the capital. The Silas rest areas and connecting roads were filled to capacity with immobile trucks. Drone footage clearly shows that the outer lane of the highway was completely occupied by trucks, while traffic in the other lanes came to a standstill due to this bottleneck. So, what was the technical reason behind this logistical army? Here we see the new toll regulations that the government tried to implement quietly, but which caused panic in the sector. The package announced at the end of November envisaged an exorbitant increase of over 50% in tolls on main roads. This rate was well above inflation and would have completely wiped out the sector's profit margins. In response to the backlash, the government made a tactical retreat, announcing that it would reduce the increase from 50% to 35% and postpone the full ban until March 2026. However, this step back did not calm the anger. Rather, it deepened the crisis of confidence. This is because industry representatives saw that the government had reached this compromise behind closed doors only with large logistics giants close to it, such as Weber's, which is allegedly linked to Orban's son-in-law. Small hauliers realized they were not at the table and that the system was deliberately manipulated to allow the big fish to swallow the small ones. To view this congestion on the M3 motorway as merely a problem for people arriving late to work in Budapest would be a major strategic blind spot. This action has the potential to create a continent-wide ripple effect by turning Hungary's critical position on the European map into a weapon. Geographically, Hungary is located at the distribution hub of Central Europe. Parts coming from the industrial heart of Germany going to assembly lines in Romania, textile and food products from Turkey reaching Western European shelves, or raw materials from the Balkans flowing north, all must pass through these logistical arteries. What is happening now is the tourniquet effect of squeezing this artery. If the M0 ring road and M3 motorway around Budapest remain blocked for an extended period, it will immediately create ischemia, blood flow disruption, in the European supply chain. The timing of the protest maximizes this effect. We are in the peak holiday season, when retail stocks are at critical levels. A traffic jam in Budapest could mean empty shelves in a Vienna supermarket or a halt in the just-in-time production line at a Munich car factory. This ripple effect also serves as a regional warning. Like the farmer protests on the Polish border or the yellow vests in France, truckers in Hungary are turning economic power into a political veto authority. Governments are seeing once again how decisions made at the table can be halted by thousands of tons of steel. In Hungary's case, this situation creates an irreparable crack in Orban's image as a strong leader who controls everything. When logistics stop, the state's functioning also stops, and right now, Hungary's engine is sputtering. This metallic lockdown on the M3 highway is not just a traffic problem. It is an X-ray of a deep structural collapse within Viktor Orban's regime's home front. This event is the realization of Orban's greatest fear, an economic uprising from the grassroots. The regime, which has so far succeeded in marginalizing the opposition by labeling them globalist elites or Brussels bureaucrats, now faces a much more dangerous opponent: its own working class. Truck drivers are at the very heart of Orban's traditional voter base. They are not elites, they are the people themselves. These people taking to the streets shouting, "We can't live! The system is killing us!" shows that the foundations of Orban's populist stronghold are rotting. Here, the shadow of a new actor who has become the regime's nightmare falls on the scene. Peter Magyar and the Tisza party. Although they did not directly organize this protest, Magyar's statement that "we stand with the peaceful protesters" reveals the potential to turn this anger into political capital. And this situation was turning into a major disaster for both Putin and Orban. Vladimir Putin has built an impregnable fortress at the heart of Europe for years, and he believed the walls of this fortress could withstand any pressure from the West. But on the night of December 14th, it's not just the walls of that fortress that are shaking. Its very roots are being shaken. Viktor Orban, Moscow's most loyal ally in Europe, is facing the biggest nightmare of his political career. On December 14th, Hungarian streets went viral worldwide on social media. Hundreds of thousands of people poured into the streets with torches in their hands. These torches were not a show of love, rather were lit to burn down the Orban regime. Hundreds of thousands of people in Budapest demanded an end to impunity and the resignation of Viktor Orban, a collaborator with Russia. The parliament building was surrounded by tens of thousands of people, led by the opposition leader. As the opposition leader Magyar shouted that everything was over, tens of thousands of people called for Orban's resignation in a single voice. This was the voice of an entire country saying, "Enough is enough." Ruin and chaos were coming for the order established by Putin and his elite rulers. Just last week before, Russian influence in Bulgaria was shattered by a quiet but deep political earthquake. Now, it is not the aftershocks of that earthquake, but its main wave that has struck Hungary. These are not just ordinary protests or simple internal political issues. This is a strategic breaking point, where the Kremlin's last seat at the European table has been overturned. Orban's government is wobbling, and for the first time, Moscow is truly feeling the cold, ominous breath of complete isolation on its neck. And just a few hours after the protests that same night, Putin made a shocking statement to the entire world. Let's watch Putin's panicked speech as resignation protests against Orban unfold. Well, Putin is telling people that all the current hardships they are experiencing are not the result of Russia's hostile actions, as claimed by those with malicious intent.
You must pay for the fight against the mythical Russian threat out of your own pockets.
A superpower leader is addressing the entire world while hundreds of thousands of people are losing their lives on the front lines. While millions of people are starving and homeless in the heart of Europe, struggling to survive in inhumane conditions. And he says that the current problems are the result of years of actions, mistakes, short-sightedness, and greed by the ruling elites of these countries. It was the same when Georgia was invaded in 2008, when Chechen people were being massacred, when Crimea was annexed in 2014, and Ukraine. And it is truly significant that Putin is making this speech tonight. It is more than a coincidence, because his last stronghold, Orban, is about to fall, and Europe was finally standing up against tyranny, oligarchy, and Kremlin influence. Although everything seemed like a very familiar scenario in Romania a few days ago, this time the variables in the equation were completely different. This chain of events that erupted in Budapest began not with an opposition movement financed from outside, but with the emergence of Peter Magyar, a figure who came from within the system itself and knew the regime's codes very well. Peter Magyar was a former bureaucrat who had observed from within how Viktor Orban's power structure, media control, and pressure on the judiciary worked. And now his greatest weapon was this inside information advantage. The crowds that poured into the squares at Magyar's call represented much more than the classic opposition groups we were accustomed to. They represented an angry wave from every segment of society. Kossuth Square, the epicenter of the protests, had hosted many demonstrations throughout its history, but the energy and determination of tonight's crowd was unlike anything seen during Orban's 14 years in power. People, waving not only Hungarian flags, but also banners reading, "We are not afraid," and "Resign," were shoving a reality that the government's media outlets tried to ignore, the reality of corruption and state capture, into the eyes of the entire world. When we deepen our analysis, we see that it was not just Peter Magyar's charisma that ignited these protests. This was the result of a social explosion caused by years of accumulated economic hardship, inflation, and the cutting of EU funds. Orban reaped the benefits of his balancing act between Brussels and Moscow for a long time, but now that balance has been upset. The people grew tired of their leaders constantly fighting with external forces, or Brussels bureaucrats, and began to focus on the fire in their own kitchens, the rot within their own state. The Tisza movement, founded by Peter Magyar and rapidly gaining momentum, filled this void, offering people not just a protest, but an alternative. This alternative promised transparent governance based on European standards, not in Russia's shadow. At this point, we must also consider the intelligence aspect of the situation. It is not difficult to guess how closely Moscow was monitoring developments in Budapest. For Russia, Orban was not only a friendly leader, but also a Trojan horse within NATO and the EU. However, tonight we see that the wheels of that Trojan horse have been broken. The operations carried out by Russian intelligence services for years to maintain their influence in the region have been rendered ineffective in the face of this mass awakening of the Hungarian people. The propaganda machine has stalled, and disinformation campaigns have backfired. This investigation curtain in Budapest shows us one thing very clearly. No matter how powerful a regime may appear, when faced with a movement that comes from within, knows the system's weaknesses, and touches on the real concerns of the people, that power is gone in an instant. The Peter Magyar affair is not a simple political rivalry, but the collapse of a system's immune system. The heat of this fire burning in Budapest is warming not only the waters of the Danube, but the entire political climate of Europe. And this warming signals a meltdown far more dangerous for Moscow than global warming. Now, Magyar perfectly combines Orban's narrative of a corrupt oligarchic system with this truckers' protest. The government's deal behind closed doors with the giant Weberers company linked to Orban's son-in-law, while crushing small hauliers, proves Magyar's thesis that the state is run like a family business. This situation transforms the protest from an economic rights struggle into a regime-opposing legitimacy crisis. Another element we see in the strategic picture is the boomerang effect of geo-logistical blackmail. Orban has pursued a policy of diplomatic blackmail for years by using his veto card against the EU. But now, truckers in his own country are using the same veto power against Orban by blocking highways. This ironic situation highlights the fragility of authoritarian regimes. The tighter the central control, the faster a single point of congestion in the system, in this case the M3 highway, can paralyze the entire body. Furthermore, this crisis weakens Hungary's role as a Trojan horse within Europe. Orban was flirting with China and Russia, claiming to be Europe's logistical gateway. However, a government that cannot manage its own internal logistics network or keep its capital open becomes an unreliable partner for Beijing or Moscow as well. If transporting goods in Hungary becomes a gamble due to bureaucratic arbitrariness and civil unrest, the gateway to the east strategy will also collapse. Ultimately, this blockade in Budapest is an early warning siren for Orban ahead of the upcoming 2026 elections. Economic contraction and the high cost of living have become too sharp to be covered up by nationalist rhetoric. The truckers' resistance has shown that the wall of fear can be breached. The regime can stop 50 trucks with the police, but it has no barrier to stop the economic desperation and anger represented by the thousands of people behind them. Those truck headlights illuminating the Budapest night are not a celebration, but a harbinger of the approaching storm. Viktor Orban has defied Europe for years, but now he is surrounded in his own backyard, on his own highway. When logistics stop, power stops. When hundreds of thousands of people protest oligarchy, corruption, and inflation in front of government buildings, order collapses. The administration falls. This blockade in Budapest is the moment when Orban's and Putin's illusion of Hungary collapses. And this seems like only the beginning.
This isn't just a traffic jam, it's a regime collapse. As the blockade tightens, Orban is losing control and Moscow is losing its grip. Subscribe Krista News Update to keep up with this unfolding storm.